Urgent. Bates family member Alyssa and John Webster survived terrifying car crash. It was one of those mornings that felt almost too perfect to be real. The sun had barely climbed over the rooftops of Claremont, Florida, and the Webster home was already awake with laughter, warmth, and love. Alyssa was in the kitchen, her soft humming blending with the quiet sizzle of pancakes on the stove. The smell of maple syrup floated through the house, a scent her daughters loved. Little Zoe was sitting at the table, swinging her feet and waiting for breakfast, while Macy tried to help her mom by placing napkins beside every plate. John walked in from the porch, coffee in hand, still half-dressed for work. His tie hung loose around his neck, and there was that familiar calm in his eyes. The calm of a man who found joy in the small, ordinary moments of life. He leaned down to kiss Alyssa's forehead, whispering something that made her laugh softly. It was simple. It was real. It was everything they ever wanted. A family built on faith, love, and the comfort of togetherness. After breakfast, the house turned into a beautiful kind of chaos. Children's shoes being found, car keys being misplaced, giggles echoing through the hallway. Alyssa called out, "Let's go, girls," and the sound of tiny footsteps hurried toward the door. Before leaving, Alyssa paused for a moment near the doorway. She looked around the house, the framed pictures on the wall, the notes stuck to the fridge, the gentle mess of a home full of life. She smiled. John stood beside her, holding her hand. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, and together, they stepped out into the bright morning. The road ahead was quiet, sunlight breaking through the trees as they drove away. Alyssa humming to a song playing softly on the radio, John keeping one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting near hers. They talked about simple things, weekend plans, the kids' new school projects, a family picnic they wanted to have soon. Everything felt right. Everything felt safe. But sometimes life doesn't warn you when it's about to change. Sometimes, in the middle of the most peaceful day, fate waits quietly around the next corner. And on that bright Florida morning, as the Webster's laughter filled the car, destiny was already writing a story that no one saw coming. The road stretched ahead, quiet and endless, bathed in the soft glow of the late morning sun. Alyssa and John drove through winding lanes surrounded by trees that shimmered in the light. The girls were singing along to a children's song in the back seat, their innocent voices filling the car with joy. Alyssa turned slightly, smiling at them. "You girls are my sunshine," she said softly. John laughed, glancing at her for a moment. That familiar look that said everything. In that single second, the world still felt safe. But safety can be an illusion, fragile like glass. They were driving down Highway 27, not far from home. The traffic wasn't heavy, the sky was clear, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Until it wasn't. A truck, large, speeding, and out of control, came from the opposite lane. The driver, distracted for just a moment, swerved. It happened so fast that no one had time to think, no time to react, no time to pray. The sound came first, that terrifying screech of tires against asphalt, that echo that splits the world into two halves, before and after. John's hands gripped the wheel, his instincts taking over, but there was nowhere to go. Alyssa gasped, her hand flying toward her husband, the other reaching back instinctively toward the children. Then impact. The sound of metal twisting, glass shattering, the world spinning out of control. The car jolted violently, everything turning into blinding light and noise. Time didn't stop, but it felt like it slowed. Every heartbeat, every breath, every cry stretching into eternity. When the car finally stopped, silence fell. Not peaceful silence, but the heavy, haunting kind that comes after chaos. Smoke rose from the hood. The sound of dripping fuel mixed with faint, broken sobs. Inside, Alyssa's world was spinning. The airbag had exploded against her chest, leaving her breathless. Her first thought wasn't of herself. It was of her children. "Girls, are you okay?" she whispered, voice trembling. John, barely conscious, tried to move, his hand reaching out for her. His voice was weak, but his eyes searched for hers. "Alyssa, stay with me." Sirens began to wail in the distance. Faint at first, then closer, louder, desperate. Strangers stopped their cars, running toward the wreckage, shouting for help. One woman knelt beside the window, trembling as she tried to open the door. "Hold on. Help is coming," she cried. The smell of burnt rubber and gasoline filled the air. The children were crying softly, scared but alive. Alyssa tried to comfort them, even as tears streamed down her own face. In those minutes that felt like hours, the only thing that mattered was each heartbeat, each breath, each word that still managed to escape trembling lips. When the paramedics arrived, the world turned into flashing lights and hurried voices. Alyssa and John were lifted out of the car, their hands finding each other one last time as stretchers carried them in separate directions. The day that had started with laughter, sunlight, and love, now ended with sirens echoing through the streets of Florida. For everyone who knew them, that moment would become the one they would never forget, the moment everything changed. The echo of sirens faded as the ambulance doors slammed shut. Inside, the paramedics worked frantically, oxygen mask on Alyssa's face, her pulse faint but steady. John lay on the stretcher beside her, blood running down his temple, his breathing shallow. Every bump on the road felt like time itself shaking. "Stay with us, sir. We're almost there," one of the medics said firmly, his voice trembling just slightly. Alyssa could barely open her eyes. The lights above her flickered past. White, then yellow, then white again, like flashes of memory. The children's voices, the laughter, the morning sun. It all replayed in fragments, slipping in and out of her mind. She tried to whisper something, but the words wouldn't come. Only one thought repeated in her heart. "Please God, don't take him away." When they reached the hospital, everything turned into chaos and motion. The emergency doors burst open. Doctors and nurses surrounded them, shouting instructions, pushing gurneys through bright, cold corridors. "Trauma room ready. Blood pressure dropping. Get me a CT scan now." The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. A smell that always meant fear, always meant waiting. Hours passed, though no one really knew how many. Outside the trauma ward, Kelly Jo and Gil Bates arrived, their faces pale, eyes wet with disbelief. The phone call had shattered their morning. Alyssa and John, car accident, critical condition. Kelly Jo's hands shook as she pressed them together, whispering a prayer under her breath. Gil stood beside her, holding his wife's shoulder tightly, though his own eyes glistened. Behind them, Aaron, Carlin, and some of the older siblings began to arrive, their faces full of worry and tears. The waiting room was silent except for the ticking of a wall clock and the quiet sobs of a family praying harder than ever before. Erin sat with her hands clasped, tears falling onto the small Bible she carried everywhere. "Lord, please," she whispered, voice cracking. "Don't let my sister go through this." Carlin, usually full of laughter, sat still, her face buried in her husband Evan's shoulder, shaking quietly. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity. Nurses came and went, faces unreadable, voices calm but distant. When a doctor finally stepped out, everyone stood. His scrubs were marked with faint traces of blood, his expression heavy. "They're both stable," he said, and a soft gasp rippled through the room. "But John's condition is serious. We've stopped the internal bleeding, but he's not out of danger yet." Kelly Jo's legs nearly gave out from relief and fear all at once. Gil caught her before she fell, whispering, "They're alive. That's what matters." But for Alyssa, the night had just begun. In her hospital bed, she woke slowly, the sound of machines beeping, the taste of dryness in her mouth. She turned her head weakly, her eyes blinking through the dim light. "John," she whispered. There was no answer, only the rhythmic hum of the monitors beside her. Her mind raced back to the crash, the sound of her children crying, the flash of light, and then nothing. Tears slipped from her eyes as she stared at the ceiling. "Please let him be okay," she murmured, voice trembling. Outside, the Bates family gathered in the chapel. Candles flickered as they held hands in prayer, a circle of faith and love, asking for a miracle. And as the night deepened over Florida, their voices echoed softly in that small hospital chapel, words of hope rising above the fear, a family clinging to the only thing they had left, belief that love could still win against the darkness. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin hospital curtains, but inside, the world still felt dark. The machines hummed softly, their steady beeps the only sound that proved life was still there. Alyssa opened her eyes slowly, her body weak, her mind heavy with confusion. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The white walls, the smell of antiseptic, the quiet echo of footsteps outside, it all felt unreal. Then it came back. The sound of metal. The scream of tires. The crash. John's voice calling her name. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She tried to move, but pain ran through her body like lightning. Tubes and wires surrounded her, holding her to a fragile line between strength and surrender. The door opened gently. Kelly Jo stepped in first, her eyes swollen from crying but her voice soft and full of love. "Sweetheart, you're awake." Alyssa's lips trembled. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Where's John? Is he okay?" Kelly Jo froze. For a moment, she couldn't find words. She sat beside the bed, taking Alyssa's hand into hers, warm, trembling, desperate to protect her from the truth. "He's here, honey. He's in the ICU. The doctors are doing everything they can." That wasn't the answer Alyssa wanted. Her heart knew what her mother's voice was trying to hide. "Tell me the truth," she pleaded, tears spilling over. Kelly Jo's voice broke. He's fighting, baby. But it's bad." The words hung in the air like a shadow, heavy, cold, unshakable. Alyssa turned her face away, silent tears running down her cheeks. She stared at the window, the sunlight blurring through her tears. The morning that once meant family breakfasts and laughter now felt like a stranger, cruel and distant. In another wing of the hospital, John lay surrounded by machines. His chest rose and fell slowly, his body motionless, his face pale but peaceful. Doctors moved quietly around him, whispering numbers, checking monitors. "He's stable," one nurse said softly, "but we don't know when he'll wake up." Hours passed. The Bates family stayed close, praying, waiting. Aaron came into Alyssa's room with a trembling smile. "He's strong, Alyssa. You know him. He's going to pull through." Alyssa tried to smile back, but her eyes told a different story, a storm of fear and faith fighting inside her. "I just need to see him," she whispered. "Please." The doctors hesitated but finally agreed. They wheeled her slowly through the quiet corridor, the sound of the wheels echoing against the tile floor. Each turn brought her closer to him, her heart pounding with every second. When she entered the ICU, everything went still. The room was filled with soft beeping, the steady rhythm of a ventilator. There he was. John. Her husband. Her best friend. Lying still, surrounded by the machines that kept him alive. Alyssa reached out, her hand shaking as she touched his. His skin was cool, but the moment she held him, something inside her broke. "John, it's me," she whispered. "I'm here. I'm okay. You don't have to be afraid." Her tears fell onto his hand as she pressed it to her face. "You promised me we'd grow old together. You promised me we'd watch the girls graduate. You promised." Her voice faded into sobs. Behind her, Kelly Jo quietly wiped her eyes, and Gil stood silently, his face turned away as he whispered another prayer under his breath. The room was filled with love, pain, and the sound of faith trying to hold everything together. And as the hours passed, Alyssa stayed there, her fingers never leaving John's hand, her heart whispering the only words she could still believe in. "Please come back to me." Night fell again over the hospital. The world outside kept moving, cars passing, lights flickering, people laughing somewhere far away. But inside that one small ICU room, time had stopped. Alyssa hadn't left John's side all day. Her hand still held his, her thumb gently tracing the wedding ring he always wore. The machines hummed in quiet rhythm, keeping a fragile heartbeat alive. Every hour, a nurse came in. Every hour, Alyssa asked the same question. "Is he getting better?" And every time, the answer came in soft, heavy words. "We're still waiting." The Bates family stayed in the chapel again that night. Kelly Jo knelt with her hands folded, whispering prayers until her voice was gone. Gil stood behind her, head bowed, tears slipping down quietly. No cameras, no show, no audience, only a family fighting for one of their own. In the ICU, the clock struck midnight. The lights dimmed. Alyssa looked at John, the man who had been her everything. She remembered the first day they met, the way he made her laugh, the nights they stayed up dreaming about their future, the mornings filled with coffee and kisses and chaos. She leaned closer, her voice trembling but full of love. "John, it's me. The girls are okay. They're safe. You did that. You kept us safe." Her tears fell onto his hand, glistening under the soft blue hospital light. I don't know what God has planned for us, she whispered. But if you can hear me, please, please fight. Please come back home. For a long moment, there was nothing. Only silence. Then the faintest movement. His fingers twitched under hers. Alyssa gasped, her heart leaping. John! She cried softly, hope flooding her chest. The monitors began to beep faster. The nurse rushed in, checking the screens, calling out for the doctor. He's responding, she said. His vitals are improving. Alyssa covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Not of sorrow this time, but of something brighter, something that had almost died but found its way back. Hope. Hours later, as dawn began to break, sunlight once again filled the room. Just like it had that morning before the crash. Alyssa sat by the bed, her head resting against his hand. His eyes slowly fluttered open. Hey! His voice was weak, barely a whisper. Alyssa lifted her head, her eyes wide, her heart trembling. John. He smiled faintly, tired but alive. You're here. I never left, she said, her voice breaking with tears. I never will. The machines kept beeping softly, steady, strong, alive. Outside the room, Kelly Jo and Gil embraced, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Aaron and Carlin wept quietly, holding each other, whispering, he's awake. Thank you, God. He's awake. For the first time in days, the halls of that hospital felt lighter. As morning sunlight poured through the window, Alyssa closed her eyes, whispering a quiet prayer of gratitude. Thank you, she said softly. For another day. For another chance. And there, in that small hospital room, surrounded by love, faith, and the miracle of survival, Alyssa and John began their second chance at life. Not the same as before, but maybe even more beautiful. Because sometimes, when everything breaks, love is the only thing strong enough to put it back together again.